It's 17 minutes before 8 o'clock here on Information Morning. Seems like the last two Fridays, between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, we've been able to tell some pretty good stories. Like the one about the mother and son who got together for their first Mother's Day in 31 years. That was the one we did last Friday. Well, today we're going towards the waters of the Bredor Lakes, in that area between Eskasoni and Big Pond. A beautiful area at this time of the year. Drove by it yesterday. But for many people of the Eskasoni First Nation, a look at those shores reminds them of sadness and a secret, a mystery that's affected the lives of many families there, a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Information Morning's Barry Morrison has this story, and he's with me this morning. Hi.
Hi, Ian.
So, when does the story begin?
Some time ago, Ian. This story started just over 60 years ago, and it takes us back to the morning of Tuesday, March the 31st, 1936. Now, that's when two couples, and they were Noel and Judina Marshall, and Joseph and Katie Michael, pushed off in a wooden boat from that shore at Eskasoni, and Ian, they never returned home. They disappeared.
So what was their connection? How were they related, these people?
Well, the two women were sisters, we know that. Their father was John Herney. Now, he was well known in Eskasoni as a boat builder, and in fact, the boat that they left in that morning was a boat that he had built. He was known in Big Pond for his boat building. He had sold, from what I gather, boats around the lake. Now, at this point, I'd like to introduce you to Greg Johnson.
Okay, who's he? What sort of role does he have?
Now, Greg Johnson lives in Eskasoni. In fact, he operates a small radio station on the reserve. Greg is a big man. He's very soft-spoken. And I guess my impression of him is a wise man, someone on the reserve whose opinion is well respected.
Experienced.
Yeah, experienced, and people listen to him. And this story has been his passion, really, for about the past 12 years now. He's investigated the story, he's documented whatever he could document on this disappearance, from people on the reserve to the other side of the lake in Big Pond. So I got in touch with Greg and spent some time with him, and in fact we went down to the water line in Eskasoni, and he showed me the approximate area pretty close to where they shoved off. And that's the question I asked him, and I asked him, what do we know about these two relatively young couples?
Well, they had lots of children. They had 14, I think 13 in all, and one lady was pregnant 8 months about. And the other thing is that they were drinking when they left, and or they had seed beer with them. And some claim that they were not drinking, but others claim that they do. I believe myself that they were, but not very much. And they had two sets of oars, two tow pins, so that it wouldn't take them very long to get across, about a little over an hour maybe.
Now, Barry, what was the draw on Big Pond? What made them want to go across to there?
Well, at that time, doing business between the people of the Eskasoni First Nation and the residents of Big Pond wasn't really a foreign concept. They're almost straight across the water from each other, two very different but kind of parallel communities. So, that morning that they left, the couples had on board their boat things like wax, crepe paper, flowers. And remember, I said it was March 31st, so
yes.
This would have been in the Easter season.
Right.
So they had baskets of Easter flowers. Greg Johnson says they had things like hardwood axe handles. They had woven baskets. And so they would take this and they would go across to Big Pond and they would sell this up and down the lake.
So, did they make it?
Well, it depends who you talk to on that question. Now, I haven't seen the newspaper reports of the day, but Greg Johnson, who has spent a lot of time researching this story, tells me that according to the newspaper report, if you read the paper from about a week after that, it refers to the disappearance as these people being swept away to their deaths. But in his research, Greg says he has learned there was a fine day for boating. There were other boats in the lake at that time. The weather wasn't bad, as may be reported by the newspaper. In fact, there was a funeral on the Eskasoni Reserve the weekend before that Tuesday morning, which meant people traveled to Eskasoni from other reserves up the lake, further up the lake from Chapel Island. And in fact, the morning that this couple left, there were other boats from the reserve that went back to Chapel Island on that same morning. So boating weather was fine. So what happened, Greg and I, after we talked in Eskasoni, we drove around the lake to the other side at Big Pond, and he showed me where he believes the two couples came ashore.
It's foggy, but right through that fog is Eskasoni, and that point over there would be the property of Dougal and Bella McPhee, and that where would the boat would have landed, most likely, and because the house is up there, and they would have gone there for lunch.
Well, what leads you to believe that they did come ashore here in this area?
Well, the nephew, Donnie McPhee, of here, he was the nephew of Dougal McPhee, and he said that I have him on tape, and he has told even the family. I brought the family. And he told them that these people, his uncle told him that they had dinner here, that they landed here for sure, and that the one of the women was pregnant, and that they were drinking, and that the men, according to Donnie McPhee, that didn't get along. Of course, you know, we don't know what that means, and that they definitely arrived here, because there was nothing. If it was calm, how could they not arrive?
So Greg believes that indeed they did arrive, but what happened after that is unknown.
Did they mount a search?
Well, there was a search, apparently a brief official search. There was a basket of flowers floating along the shore. The boat was found about a week later, apparently floating upside down with a hole punched in the boat from the outside. Greg Johnson's father, actually, and his uncles made heavy drags, and they equipped them with large halibut hooks, and they dragged the lake north to south, east to west. And there was a shoreline search by native people. It lasted about a month, but the bodies were never found.
And the children, what happened to them?
Well, the children were taken in on the reserve, and they were cared for by other native families, as is the culture and tradition.
So 60 years later, what brings their story, their predicament, to your attention?
Well, about a week ago, I received a phone call from a man who lives in Eskasoni. His name is Von Doucette, and now his mother is Georgina Doucette, and the women who went missing were both of her aunts. They were sisters to her mother. Mr. Doucette said that I should visit Eskasoni because there was apparently kind of a rumor rippling through the community about a man who said he knew what happened 60 years ago, and he told his story to a man by the name of Jim Thompson.
Okay, Jim Thompson, who's he?
Jim Thompson is from Irish Vale, and it just happens that he dates one of the granddaughters of the missing women. Now, he says last fall he was hitchhiking when a man picked him up. The man was on his way home to Big Pond. They talked about the weather. They talked about the road conditions. He told Jim Thompson that he had worked for the Highways Department all his life. He was a widower now. He was retired. And then he started to tell Jim Thompson a very, very disturbing story.
And he told me that these four Indian people, he called them Indians, they came from the left, from the shore. They went up with baskets to the right. The men were in tents. They were all drinking. It was a Friday night. When they came back, one of the old ladies was obviously pregnant, and she was a pretty lady. He mentioned that, said she was pretty.
And these men who were drinking, they were who now?
They were highway workers, all highway workers, just hard labor, you know. And one of them pulled this young woman, Indian woman, into a tent and started to proceed to rape her. The husband, or her boyfriend, I don't know if it was her husband or boyfriend, objected to this, and he went in to intercede, and in the process both of them were killed. And since there was two more left, the other men hit them with whatever they had, or they killed them. And he stopped there. He didn't go any further. So I said, where are they? Are they in someone's driveway, or where are they? That's the only question I asked him. And he said, no, every time you drive over this highway, you're driving over them. And basically that was the story. And he was driving a big white car. He was a widower, and he was approximately 80 years old.
Ian, Mr. Thompson says the man offered the details of the story without any prompting. He didn't know that Mr. Thompson, knew some of the story, or even the family, for that matter. The unfortunate thing is that Mr. Thompson, he didn't get the man's name, he didn't get license plate or anything to find that person again.
So what would Greg Johnson, the man who's followed this story for 10, 12 years, what would his assessment be?
Well, he first heard this last fall. This hitchhiking story happened late last summer or early last fall, and Greg was told the story by Mr. Thompson. I guess you could say he kind of gives it the official maybe. He looks at the story and he says in the first telling it was a small white car. And he wonders about things like the highway workers and road construction. And in the 30s, did they start and build roads and work on highway construction as early as March? He's not totally convinced. And sometimes, he says that stories, as we know, tend to get bigger sometimes over time with the telling.
I really don't know what to think of that. I think that that's just one of the many stories that exist, but I've taped people, and I've talked to him when this happened, and I immediately searched to look for that man, and I couldn't find him, and they said nobody existed with a white car and was 84 or in Irishville or around here. There is possibility that it might be true, but I don't know.
What do you think happened?
I think that they caught up with some people, whoever it is, and they murdered him, and they killed him. And they threw their stuff in the water and got rid of the boat and put a hole in it to make it look like that something happened. And I think more people know about this, and I think that we have a case of mass murder.
Do you think it will ever be solved?
I think we're close to solving it. I think there is somebody out here. I think somebody across Canada or out here that knows the true story, that was there, that, I think there is somebody that knows the truth.
Now, Ian, Greg tells me that there have been other stories over the years. I guess the most notable, a story that originated from the mother of Chief Bernard. Apparently back in the 60s during a stay in hospital, a woman told her that her husband had murdered those couples. But attempts to determine just who that patient was with Ms. Bernard in hospital have just been unsuccessful.
So what would family members related to the victims want to know at this point?
Well, the tragedy has hurt a lot of people. Like there were over a dozen children involved. Most of them a good number of them are deceased by now, so are their descendants. They simply want it to be over. As I mentioned earlier, I talked with Georgina Doucette. She's the niece of the two women who were lost. Remember, those two women were her mother's sisters. I sat in her sewing room and chatted with her about it, and she says this will never be over until the people of Eskasoni know what happened.
It never dies out. It's like a candle, It keeps burning every once in a while. It's like an eternal flame or something. I think that's how I would describe it. An eternal flame. It, never dies. Every once in a while somebody would mention it, or especially our family, when we all get together, somebody would come up with it again, and we talk about it, and nothing is ever settled or come to an end. It haunts you, and it really hurts. It hurts our people.
What would you like to see happen now?
Well, if anybody has any information pertaining to this tragedy, I wish they would come forth and tell us what happened. And maybe, we could end it. I would like it to end, to have some answers, and to bring the remains home, if at all possible. Give them a decent burial where they should be, in Eskasoni.
Georgina Doucette. And Barry, thank you very much for the story this morning.
Thank you, Ian.
Barry Morrison covers many issues for Information Morning, as well as producing stories for this show. 2 minutes before 8 o'clock.